I'm Kathy Wicks, the Director of Sustainability for Auxiliary Enterprises, and our team is excited to be bringing you these virtual gatherings for resilience and sustainability. And so this is the second of our series, and it's called Simple Cooking, Taking Advantage of What's in Your Pantry. And what we'll do is we'll turn it over to the chefs in just a minute. We'll be taking questions throughout on chat. So if you have a question, go ahead and put it up, and we'll be putting out questions throughout the talk and demonstration, and then we'll leave a little bit of time at the end for a few more questions, and maybe you have something in your pantry that you could use some advice about. So go ahead and start putting questions up in the chat, and I'll introduce them to the chefs as they come up. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Chef Tony and Chef Bob, and they're going to talk about what to do with the stuff in your pantry.
All right. Hi, everybody. I can't really see you per se, but hopefully you're all there. Today we're just, Tony and I grabbed a bunch of stuff out of our pantry, kind of simple ingredients. We're going to walk through a few basic recipes. And again, any questions throughout, please just plug them in there, and Kathy will get them to us. But this should be fun. We're here set up in Hampshire Dining Commons, where normally it is packed right now. But it is a ghost town with only Tony, me, and Marlene videoing us. So hope everybody's being safe and doing well. But let's get started. Anything introduction?
No. Just a couple of things that I grabbed from my own pantry, which might be a little bit different from some of your pantries, but I tried to bring the most simplest things. So today I'm going to do a kale pasta with white beans and some tuna fish, which I'm sure plenty of you guys have as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start doing a little bit of chopping. And then Bob, why don't you talk about what you're going to do?
Sure. So I figured making a couple of simple salad dressings might be a good way to go. A lot of ingredients that I have here are pretty common in a lot of pantries. So the first one we're going to do is a very simple vinaigrette, which can be modified in many different ways to use what you have in your pantry. We're going to start with, a good thing to start with is some kind of mustard. This is Dijon, which is basically going to help emulsify the dressing a little bit, but it's not a necessary ingredient per se. And we have a few different vinegars here. We got a balsamic. We got a giant jug of sherry, which was not from my pantry, don't worry, and a giant jug of local apple cider vinegar here. What I like to do at home when I'm making a vinaigrette, I usually always use some kind of balsamic. However, I find balsamic to be a little too sweet if you use just that as the vinegar. So I usually blend it with a couple other vinegars. So today we'll add a splash of sherry vinegar, which is going to add, again, just more of an acid component than balsamic, which is generally sweeter. You could also add a red wine vinegar, champagne vinegar, again, the apple cider vinegar. Pretty much any kind of vinegar is going to work here. So we'll add maybe a quarter cup of that, okay? And we're going to add a splash of the sherry vinegar too here. And I'm doing this in a mason jar, which is easy and clean, and I'll show you how we're going to kind of keep this as simple as possible. A pinch of salt. You want to add the salt with the vinegar. Okay, salt dissolves into a liquid like water, vinegar, lemon juice, that kind of thing. It will not dissolve into oil. So if you add your salt in with the oil, it's not actually going to fully dissolve into your vinaigrette. We'll add just a pinch of pepper too. And then I like to add just a little bit of dash of paprika which will add just a hint of really tiny bit of spice. And any kind of dried herb usually works pretty well. This is oregano. Dried oregano is, in a lot of ways, better than a fresh oregano. It's not quite as strong and pungent. You could also add in here chives. Fresh thyme would be great. Anything like that. So we have our vinegar, Dijon mustard, a little bit of dried herb, salt and pepper. We're going to screw the cap on. We're going to give it a good shake. Kind of blend it up, okay? Unscrew the lid. And we got some good olive oil here. So a standard vinaigrette is usually like 3 parts oil, 1 part vinegar. I like to do about half and half. So if you see where your vinegar is, okay, I'm gonna add about the equal amount of oil, which you'll see on top there. After the oil's added, we'll screw the lid back on. Okay, nice and tight, and give it a good shake. A little bit easier than doing it in a bowl with a whisk. Okay. Basically, what that Dijon mustard does is it emulsifies the dressing together. It's about as simple as you can get for a vinaigrette. Again, anything you can add in here. Some shallots are always good in a vinaigrette. Fresh herbs, a little bit of more spice if you want a little bit of chili in there is good. You could do cilantro and lime juice and less vinegar for a cilantro lime dressing. But this is basically a staple in my refrigerator. This will keep easily for a month in the refrigerator, no problem. There's nothing in here that's perishable. If you have fresh ingredients like fresh chives or fresh cilantro, that'll eventually turn brown and gray, but it's still actually fine to eat.
Chef Bob?
Yes.
If you are going to use something like lime, would you also include some vinegar as well?
You said wine?
Lime, like a
Lime.
citrus.
Yeah, lime by itself can be a bit strong. So something like the apple cider vinegar with the lime would be good, or just a little pinch of sugar just to kind of balance the acidity in there as well. A good vinaigrette is not always just straight acid. Again, it should have a little bit of salt component, a little bit of acid component, and just a touch of sweetness. So in this first one, the balsamic, again, most balsamics are not actually a true balsamic vinegar, and they have a residual sweetness to them. So if you're using a straight acid, like a straight red wine vinegar or lemon juice or lime juice, just a really little pinch of sugar can go a long way to kind of balance the vinaigrette.
Thank you.
All right, so what I've done here is I've just chopped up some onions and some garlic, just really rustic, nothing too fine or anything like that. So, and then what I've done is I've preheated my pan, and I've got some olive oil in there. And what I'm going to do first is a lot of times they'll have you guys recipes make a sweat first, but what I really want to do is char our kale here first. So we need a really, really hot pan for that. And then afterwards, once the temperature comes down, then I'm going to add our aromatics to our pan here. You can hear it. That's going to sizzle. Actually sounds pretty good already. And whenever you're cooking, you just definitely want to make sure you're seasoning things with just a little pinch of salt. And really what we're trying to do, even though the kale is slightly bitter, it actually really works with a little tinge of smoke and a little bit of char, which is going to add to the pasta here. And what I've done earlier is I cooked off some spaghetti here, kind of al dente to save some time. Okay, you can see the little bits of char that's on the kale now. I'm just going to reserve that. Add. All right, right. Some of our onions and our garlic. Again, a little bit of salt. And really what we want to do is just let these guys through. We really don't want to saute them because we actually want the flavor to come out of these aromatics. And it really only takes a minute or two to do that. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of acid right now.
Marlene, can you back up just a little bit so we can hear his voice better? There we go. Thank you.
Yep, so I just added a little bit of lemon there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little chicken stock. And that's just going to evaporate out. And I reserved some of the pasta water that has a little bit of starch in it. And what's going to happen is that's going to reduce down to actually thicken our sauce here. Okay, and then straight from my pantry, we've got some white beans. And I'm going to add those guys. And I'm going to add a little bit of the juice as well. There's a little bit of protein in there, and then that's going to help thicken up the sauce as well. And, the one thing I did notice when you are looking through your pantry, just be mindful of things that might have gone bad. So I was looking at my can and blue cheese here, and you can see it's kind of dented and expanded. So what you want to do is be really careful of items that look like this, because what's happening, some air has gotten in there and it's going bad. So just be aware of that, especially pans that are dented. Things like that will have oxidants in them. So you just really want to make sure you get rid of them. So that's that. Okay. So you can see our sauce is kind of coming together just as quickly as that. Okay. And what I'm going to do is add some spaghetti here. And kale and beans are a classic combination in Italy. And even though this is kind of a pantry recipe, it's still founded in something that's very classic, that tastes fairly decent. So just add a little more salt. And add a little bit of Parmesan cheese, which I had in my refrigerator. And actually, it's started to crystallize a little bit. You can see that, which is a little bit different from regular Parmesan cheese. So it has more of a nutty flavor. It's actually starting to separate or beat just a little bit, and that means when the oil actually comes out. Okay. That's that. And last one here, we're going to add our kale back in.
Chef Tony, I got a question for you. There, if you're allergic to garlic, is there something else that you can substitute for that?
Yeah, to be honest, there are very few things that can take the place of garlic. I would probably say anything that has a little bit of pungency, maybe bump up the onions, scallions, things like that. But
shallots or thyme.
Yeah.
All of those are kind of in the same family. So if you're allergic to one, then the others might bother you as well.
Correct. But yeah, I feel that because garlic is one of the great things. And you can ask Emerald, Chef Emerald from Emerald Live, that he would always talk about garlic. No, not myself. Not myself. I'm taller than he is. No, so anyways, last little bit, I'm sure you guys have some canned tuna fish. Even I did. So what I'm going to do is add this at the very, very end, so we can just maintain those flakes there, so it doesn't fall apart. I'm going to add some of that juice. So you can see, I mean, one of the great things about canned items is that they come with this great liquor, and actually you do want to utilize them. Definitely for something like a pasta dish like this. So just a few points off. And just a little bit of lemon at the end. And definitely kale and lemon really do work. And just a little bit more Parmesan at the end. More chicken stock to thin it out a little bit. Smells great.
Yeah, nice healthy plate of food for like under $1.
Honestly, so, I mean, that's the great thing about pasta. It's shelf stable, obviously. It will store well, all these canned vegetables. And really, I mean, these are things that most people will have on hand. So there's our kale and tuna fish white bean pasta.
Chef Tony,
Over to you.
do you have
Yes.
a tuna that you recommend, like chunk or in oil or water packed?
Generally, in oil is going to be best. That's where it maintains most of the flavor. I know the Italians or Spaniards are very fond of packing things in olive oil. So if you can get something that's packed in olive oil, it's going to have a richer, better flavor.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions coming through?
How much of the water in like the beans would you use? Because it looked like you didn't use all of it.
Correct. So just, I guess, enough to help with that sauce. So it's one of these things where kind of in recipes, you can't have it the perfect amount because my saute pan is going to evaporate things differently or the different type of stoves or things like that. But, if your pasta looks watery, it probably is. And if it looks dry, it probably is dry. So if it's dry, add a little bit more. If it's a little watery, just let it evaporate a little bit more.
So of those liquids that you added, the chicken broth, the pasta water, the liquid from the beans, if it's too dry, would you go to one of those things to add more liquid to it?
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything. It's probably if you want a little bit more flavor, then you're going to add the chicken stock. If it needs to thicken a little bit more, probably the juice from the beans because there's a good amount of protein that's there that will help thicken, or the starch from the pasta water. So these items kind of are more about thickening compared to the chicken stock, which is about adding more flavor.
Great. The pasta water is if you go to a really good Italian restaurants, that's like a staple on the line that cooks use. It's really like throughout the night, as more pasta gets cooked into it, it gets cloudier and cloudier from the flour and the starch cooking in there, and that's like an essential ingredient to building really good Italian pasta dishes. It's that when you cook pasta and you really salt the water, almost like it should taste like the ocean. And then you start cooking pasta in there, that starch from the flour and that pasta leaches out and it builds the flavor in that water. So then when you add that to your pan, again, when it reduces down a little bit, all that flour in there is going to kind of naturally thicken the sauce and naturally coat the noodles. So whenever you're cooking pasta, at least in the Italian style, always use some of your pasta water. Whether you cook it ahead and save some, or you're cooking it as you go, and just a ladle of stock or a ladle of the pasta water as it's cooking into your sauce.
And it's interesting because the exact opposite is true in Asian cooking.
Correct.
Generally, what they want to do in Asian cooking is get rid of all that starchy water to have a really clean kind of texture to it. And it's not like one is better than the other. It's just different thought processes in definite. And with that water, it's almost like a risotto. It's adding creaminess and richness to a dish like this, which is very, very simple. But really, each ingredient knows its place and it's adding to your dish here.
Right. Would any kind of bean work, or is the white bean kind of the traditional to use?
So, correct. So the white bean is the traditional, but in this time or just in any time, I guess, Most beans, look at them as a vegetarian protein. So just because these are Italian beans doesn't mean you can't use black beans, or pinto beans, or vice versa.
Might look a little weird. You got black beans.
Correct. but who knows? I've actually never done it that way. It might actually look great and taste great. But there's really no right or wrong answer, especially in times like now where you're looking at your pantry and maybe you don't want to go out to the store and it's like, hey, what can I make? And as long as you have some understanding of what that ingredient is or does, then you can kind of take those things. So, we were joking earlier, if I had peanut butter and jelly, would I want to make pasta with that? No, of course not. It's got to be founded in something. So, with this, even though it's canned tuna fish, it actually will work with the beans and the pasta because all the other ingredients work, and they're very simple. But as long as you understand what makes each ingredient important to that dish.
Great, thanks.
And I think
Yeah, we got one more salad dressing here. America's favorite. We're making ranch dressing here, but obviously a homemade version. And along with this, which is again a very simple recipe and a lot of ingredients that are found in your pantry, you can modify this in many different ways to make it super healthy, to make it a full true ranch flavor. But the base of it is mayonnaise. Generally, 2 parts mayonnaise and 1 part of a liquid. A lot of people don't have buttermilk on hand, but a lot of people might have a sour cream or milk and lemon juice. If you take milk and lemon juice, you're going to basically get the same flavor as a buttermilk. We'll add a little bit of sour cream in here. Okay, we'll add a splash of milk, which will just help thin it out. A splash of the lemon juice for that acid flavor. Then some other seasonings, obviously salt and pepper. Okay, and another key ingredient is some kind of umami component, which is like a savoriness. A lot of ranch dressing has, whether it's not MSG exactly, it's a modified version of that to give it a kind of that savory taste. So this is just Worcestershire sauce. You could also use soy sauce would work just as well here. Some spices, a garlic powder, a garlic salt, garlic flakes, any kind of dried garlic is good. You could use fresh as well. Dried dill is usually a pretty key ingredient for a good ranch, homemade ranch. I brought up some dried chives as well, and I was like, I picked some out of the garden next to a Berkshire. Because if you don't have chives growing right now, you should plant some this year for next year because they come back every year in the spring, and it's one of the first ingredients to come out of the ground. So some chives, fresh chives, minced up. And then we're just going to whisk this together. So to modify this a little bit, to make it healthier, we start with a low-fat mayonnaise, and instead of using a sour cream, again, you could go a low-fat sour cream. You could also do a Greek yogurt, even a 0% fat Greek yogurt would perform just as well as a sour cream. It'll just be a little bit tangier. So we're going to thin this out just a touch more with some milk. You can see it even looks like a ranch dressing, right? I'll give it a little taste. So if you were here right now to taste this, you'd be blown away.
Where are the chips? So some Ruffles.
So a pinch more salt, and I'm going to add a pinch more of just another splash of Worcestershire. Okay, cooking again is all about just tasting as you go, seasoning as you go, and kind of making it taste how you like to eat. So I tend to like a good amount of acid flavor in the food. So I'll add a little extra lemon juice, a little extra vinegar. The Worcestershire has actually got a little bit of acid to it, as opposed to the richness, which is like the mayonnaise and things like that. So you could also do a dairy-free one with using like a soy milk and a coconut yogurt, something like that. Or again, there's a lot of mayonnaise on the shelves these days that are vegan, made without eggs and things like that. So using your common ingredients, but the spices or the flavoring is really dill, chives, a garlic. You could also add onion powder, parsley leaves a lot of times. But it can be, again, anything you have, any spice you have in your pantry. You could add some taco seasoning to this. You could add a taco salad dressing. You could add, again, cilantro and lime, and you could have a creamy cilantro lime dressing too. But the overall ingredients are pretty standard in your pantry or in your fridge. And it's really quite simple to make your own dressings in-house, as opposed to buying the store-made ones, which have a ton of sodium in them, a ton of preservatives, a ton of unnecessary ingredients and fats and things like that.
So Chef Bob, there's a question about how much is a pinch of salt really? Your pinches look a little bit bigger than they're used to.
Yeah, so we can talk about salt real quick. The salt we use at UMass is a kosher salt. A lot of what you have at home, if you don't have kosher salt, is an iodized salt. So the pinch is very different. Kosher salt, at least the Diamond Crystal brand, has half the amount of sodium per teaspoon as compared to an iodized salt. So if I take a teaspoon of this and a teaspoon of iodized salt, this has half the amount of sodium in it. So if I say a pinch, it's probably half a teaspoon or so what I season at a time. And again, cooking is all about just tasting as you go. I can take a pinch of something and know pretty much how it's going to season the food. Whereas at home, you want to start with smaller amounts and add a little bit more as you go. But always constantly tasting your food and tasting your food. And generally, a lot of home cooks are afraid to use salt. But if you're trying to create a really tasty dish, a little extra salt goes a long way in kind of blending the overall flavor of the dish together.
The other thing about salt is when we do talk about pinches, you can have your 1 pinch, you can have your 2 pinch, 3 and 4, and by the time you get to your 4th pinch, that's about a tablespoon of salt. So if you do want to measure things, you can go by the 1, which would be probably quarter teaspoon or so. 4 teaspoons to a half, and all the way up to a 4 pinch. So you don't necessarily have to measure everything out. It's just as long as you maybe measure it once and see what pinch is for you, and then from then on, the tablespoons or teaspoons that you might need in the recipe. But I definitely agree with that. I think people see us with so much salt, but really kosher salt compared to iodized salt has half the strength.
And that's in a chef's pantry at home is definitely a staple ingredient is a kosher salt. And we prefer Diamond Crystal as opposed to you see the Morton's brand of kosher salt that actually has the same amount of sodium as their iodized salt. So the Diamond Crystal is good. It's coarse, so you can kind of get a good feel for it when you're seasoning with that.
Is there anything that you shouldn't use kosher salt for?
Baking, most baking or breads are, at least recipes that you'll find in cookbooks, are scaled with iodized salt. So I do use in any kind of bread baking at home or any kind of baking cookies and brownies and things like that. I always use iodized salt.
And the other thing is, if you do need iodine, that's pretty much what the salt really is for, is to supplement deficiency. Other than that, I don't really can't, unless you're corning some beef or something like that, but even still, this will work 99% of the time.
Great, thanks. All right, are you guys ready to see what is in other people's pantries?
Absolutely, I can't wait.
I'm kind of afraid.
What do we got?
To be honest.
All right, folks, why don't you send us some of the things that are in your pantries that you'd like to try something new with?
If it's been in there for years and you're not sure what to do with it, we can try to give you some advice.
All right, let's see.
Marlene, what's in your pantry?
Cereal.
Cereal. Jeez. What kind of cereal? Fruit Loops, or do you go with more?
No, I like adding bananas to my cereal, so I go for like the flakes and almonds and stuff. Yeah.
You can use that for a lot of toppings on casserole.
yeah. Your little granola, self-made granola.
So we've got somebody that's asking about chili peppers and tomato paste, green chilies and tomato paste.
Canned green chilies or fresh?
It sounds like they're in a can.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it lends itself to either kind of Mexican flavors or, you know, Asian flavors. Probably something like canned cheese toppings, nachos, things like that, you know, which might be a really nice comfort food. Right now.
Well, you could easily take, I mean, tomato paste is a good ingredient they have on hand, and tomato paste is really just a tomato puree, just cooked down really until it's really, really thick. So if you took if you're out of tomato sauce, right, if you take tomato puree and thin it out with water, you essentially have the base of a tomato sauce. So you could take those chilies, right, and make a simple enchilada sauce. You're talking about the tomato paste, some water, some spices like cumin, coriander, dried oregano, and add those chopped chilies to it, and maybe thicken it a little bit with either some flour or cornstarch. And all of a sudden you have a pretty simple enchilada sauce.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And all those things are generally going to be in your pantry. So you're going to make a roux with butter or oil, some flour, and then, yeah, you don't even really need chicken stock for that. And then if you happen to have some tortillas, leftover chicken, or maybe one of those rotisserie chickens, you can pull that, use that as the filling, even saute some ground beef that you might have in the freezer, and something simple, hearty, comforting.
But tomato paste, is a very versatile ingredient. Again, tomatoes have a lot of umami flavor, again, that savoriness, and the more you cook them down, the more intense it gets, and also the more healthier cooked tomatoes get, the more you cook them down. So adding just a spoonful of that to pretty much any type of soup or stew, even a pasta dish, if you put a spoonful of tomato paste in there again and thin it out with a little more liquid, all of a sudden you have a tomato flavor in that pasta. You don't want to use too much tomato paste. Again, a tablespoon or two at a time for a lot of things is good, because it can easily kind of overpower a lot of other flavors.
Are there any salad dressings that you could make with those ingredients?
Yeah, I mean, the canned chilies in the ranch would be great. Again, you have a little bit of spice in there.
Be great for a taco salad.
Yeah, it'd be perfect for a taco salad. That's kind of chili ranch taco salad. The tomato paste, if you can make a tomato vinaigrette. I'm trying to think if I've ever made one with tomato paste, and I can't say I have. But I'll bet you it would work pretty good. But again, if you take a few tablespoons of tomato paste, you're going to need a lot of liquid to thin it out to the proper consistency. Mm-hmm. You're only talking about a tablespoon or so. Adding probably a neutral oil or a vinegar. Balsamic might kind of clash with even tomato and balsamic go well together. It's going to end up looking kind of weird with that dark red and that deep balsamic color. But like a red wine vinegar, even cider vinegar, sherry vinegar, thin that out, and then add oil to it. Maybe some fresh basil or fresh thyme would be good.
Great. How about chickpeas?
Chickpeas are great. I don't know if anyone's ever made hummus at home, but it's probably the most classic dish that you can absolutely make. And then you can customize it to the way you want. So whether if you want like spinach in there or extra garlic or lemon, it's as simple as getting your food processor out, getting your chickpeas, draining out the liquid, pulsing it, seasoning it, adding some tahini, some garlic, some lemon, and then just a little bit of that reserve liquid for the consistency for it.
The other really easy thing to do with them is to drain them really well, give them a rinse, dry them, just let them dry for a little bit, and then toss them with a good amount of olive oil, a little salt and pepper, lay them out on a baking sheet, and basically roast them in an oven, 400-degree oven for 10 or 15 minutes. Or you can go kind of lower and slower at like 275 or 300 degrees for a longer period of time until they're basically dry and crispy. They're actually a really good healthy snack. I've gotten my kids to eat them that way. You can also add, again, any kind of spice to them. You add a little chili powder if you like spice, or cumin, things like that. But simply roasting them in the oven, in a hot oven, is a really good snack. But they would be a good sub for your white beans in that pasta dish as well. Or salads. I mean, a simple chickpea salad. If you take some drain the chickpeas, add a simple vinaigrette to them like you made, or even if it's just a splash of olive oil, a splash of vinegar, and then any kind of fresh ingredients. You could chop up some tomatoes. You could chop up some like spinach and fold it in there. You could add some roasted peppers, some artichoke hearts,
like a Greek
olives. I mean, pretty much any kind of that Mediterranean ingredient you can think of. Making it into a chickpea salad would be a good idea.
That sounds great. All right, let's see if we get any other ones. How about a jar of olives?
You can do them warm. You know, that's kind of
They're good olives.
Yeah.
Just warm up black olives.
Yeah, I mean, if it's black olives, you know, you better slice them up and put it on your taco salad. But yeah, some good ones you can use them for olives. But also they pack a ton of flavor. So even in a pasta dish like this, you could add those olives. So,
yeah, olives and beans and tuna would, if they're just a regular, Spanish green olive, would work very, very well in there. Same in that chickpea salad. You could slice them up and add them to a chickpea salad. Black olives, again, they tend to lend themselves more to Tex-Mex flavors, things like that. So if you like olives, just add them as a topping or into quesadillas and things like that. If you're talking a better quality olive, I mean, they sell some good Calamatas in jars, or Castello Vetranos in jars, which are nice olives. Like Tony was saying, you could toss them with just a little bit of olive oil, some dried spices or herbs, and roast them lightly in the oven. And again, it's a really good way to just take those to a different level or so as a snack.
So we had somebody else add that they put green olives into their homemade tartar sauce.
Yeah, absolutely. With some chopped pickles and stuff like that, capers, all of those kind of briny ingredients work very well together and can be kind of interchangeable.
yeah, and definitely with something that's high in fat, because generally you need something to cut through that. So whether it's an acid or a vinaigrette or something that's salty and briny, like capers or olives or things like that, really cut through that. So then it has flavor. I don't know if you guys ever had like a tablespoon of olive oil, but actually it doesn't have a lot of flavor. And you need to cut through that to be able to make it, tasty.
Somebody gave me some preserved lemons. What do you do with those?
Preserved lemons. So those are a really great ingredient for like Middle Eastern cooking or Moroccan cooking. Generally, you for preserved lemon, you end up discarding all the good stuff and use the rind. So if they're whole lemons, you cut them in half. You kind of take a knife and scoop out all the flesh, and then you take the rind and really slice it as thinly as you can. Which again, in that pasta dish would be great. It's going to add that. Preserved lemons have a kind of a really good lemon flavor, as well as kind of a salt flavor and something else that's kind of in there.
Kind of sweet.
Almost a little. They usually preserve a little sugar, but some really thinly sliced rind, preserved lemon rind in that pasta dish would be great too.
I mean, for myself with preserved lemons, I'd probably get some Tito's, soak it for about 3 months, and then You got your American limoncello.
Must be 21 to use this recipe.
Correct.
Yes.
But yeah,
Okay.
I mean, that's what I'm doing. I make some lemonade.
I got a few more here. How do you make a basic peanut sauce using peanut butter?
Oh man! All right. So so the thing again, like with something that has a lot of fat, you need something salty, something kind of sour, or very, very aromatic. So I know in Asian cultures, a lot of times in Southeast Asia, if you're making like a saute sauce, then you start with some garlic, lemongrass, ginger with your aromatics. Then you can add whatever flavorings that you might want if you want a little bit of heat or things like that. Maybe a little bit of lime juice, and then use that peanut butter kind of as the base, but also to thicken it, but also add that richness. And then we've got, I would probably say some fish sauce or soy sauce or something like that to really drive that flavor. And again, something that has a lot of fat can really take on a lot of flavor, so that's why they end up being very tasty. And then, you know, marinate some chicken, grill them, you know, and then, yeah, you got your.
So I'll tell you the American version of the peanut sauce, the simple one, right? Is if you take peanut butter and if you try to add like cold water to it to mix it or any kind of liquid, it's basically going to seize up on you because there's so much fat in there. So if you take a little bit of peanut butter, you add like some hot water to it and keep on stirring it until it kind of smooths out. Then you can basically add any flavor to it. So some soy sauce is good because it adds that Asian-y flavor to it. And then any kind of like Asian chili paste or sambal or sriracha, stuff like that. That's your really simple basic peanut sauce. But if you added some rice wine vinegar, you could add some coconut milk. You could add other aromatics and actually cook it like you said, and you're going to get kind of a better overall flavor to it.
Yeah, you could go towards West Africa and Creole and use those kind of habaneros or limes or coconut.
Sure.
Other than that, you know, it's probably best in the fluff, peanut butter, and Wonder Bread. Got that.
Mute that.
There are Massachusetts.
Okay, how about some fresh mint?
Oh man, so you were talking about onions. I've got some mint growing at my place. It's actually growing up against the house near the basement where it's warmest actually. So for mint, I mean, it lends itself really to Vietnamese cooking, a lot of fresh herbs, things like that. Summer rolls are fantastic. Obviously, you know, there's a plethora of drinks that you can make with it, but chutneys and
you could also you know, mint's a very strong pungent flavor. So in that chickpea salad, which has maybe some chopped artichoke hearts and Kalamata olives with the chickpeas and oil and vinegar, adding just a little bit of chopped mint to that would just transform it to a different flavor. That would be very good. You could also, I mean, a really simple way to use mint is just to steep it into an iced tea. So if you take some water, you take a ton of mint and shove it in there and just let it sit out in the sun. It's going to slowly steep and infuse that flavor in there, and then you have basically a good base for an iced tea. Brew some simple tea and add it over ice. But mint, if you plant mint in a garden, it will eventually overtake. I think Dan talked about that last week.
It's actually very evasive. It's actually hard to get rid of it. And it seems like that the more you try to it or whatever, it seems like the seeds just you know. But again, like I said, you know, I probably make some drinks out of it. Nice tequila.
Preserved lemon and mint.
Correct, right? You muddle it and it's a nice ice. Self-quarantine.
Yeah.
All right, how about pre-made tube of polenta?
Say again?
Pre-made tube of polenta.
I can't say I've ever used that, but my guess is you would just
Tube of polenta, like
they sell pre-cooked in a tube. So I mean, polenta is actually a really, really great ingredient, but it requires, to get it flavorful, it requires a lot of extra flavors or fat to it. So chicken stock, lemon juice, Parmesan, butter. So basically take that tube, heat it up in a pot, whatever the directions say, if it adds liquid or not. But to get it flavorful, you need a good amount of salt, you need a good amount spice and cheese and fat without going overboard. But it's a good base for a lot of, if you're doing a braised meat or even a roast chicken, Polenta would be great with that too. You might also be able to, again, I've never done this before, but take that tube and slice it and then just pan fry it. And you'd have like a Polenta cake. Maybe dust it with a little flour first and just pan fry it.
I mean, the thing is, you can look at those kind of meals, like whether it's congee or oatmeal or things like that, or even Polenta, and make it its own bowl. So then whatever you have, you can add it into it. So whether it's, you got some fresh vegetables, like some cucumbers or some romaine or whatever, you can make like a power salad bowl with that, or whatever other ingredients you got, like I said, tuna or beans or what have you, and make something that's nutritious, that's got enough protein and enough vegetables.
So it would be all about the toppings. I mean, pretty much anything you put on top could be good as long as the flavors melt very well together.
Right. How about canned beets?
Oh God.
Get some Tito's. No.
I'm not a beet person at all, so I don't know what to do with canned beets. No idea.
Oh my God. Borscht? Make some borscht?
Yeah,
that's
like a Russian soup.
Yeah, honestly, that's probably it.
I mean, if you like beets, can you have canned beets in your pantry? You probably know what to do with them better than I do if you're just trying to use them up. Adding them into a salad would be fine on a topping of a salad. You probably could puree them in a blender and make a vinaigrette out of it. You'd end up with a pretty bright colored vinaigrette.
Yeah. I mean, you could slice them up or dice them up, glaze them up with some honey or maple syrup, and then add some walnuts, nuts like that, and bake it off. You can see I'm trying to add some fat and some flavors.
Well, there's this really good website. You go to www.google.com. Just type in canned beet recipes, and you're probably going to get like 2 million hits.
All right. What do you think about pink salt? Worth it or a hype?
Overrated. Overrated.
Himalayan pink salt.
I have a little tiny jar. It's like this big at home. I've had it for like 2 years. I use it for maybe finishing as a finishing salt, like I grill a steak, which I've already seasoned. I might slice it and sprinkle a bit over top. The one sea salt that I use a lot, that like true sea salt, is called Maldon, Maldon. It's a really coarse, flaky sea salt. If you look at it really closely, they look like little pyramids. That I find to have a really good flavor and a coarse enough texture without being too salty, where you could actually use it and see it and taste it. But the Himalayan pink salt it's gonna be hard to see it and notice a difference in flavor.
Plus it's really dense, so it actually kind of hurts your teeth a little bit. Cuts you. I prefer, my favorite one is Fleur de Sel, which some of the best stuff comes from Normandy or Brittany in France. But it looks something like that. I know that they've got Jurassic salt from Montana, which is 600 million years old. So if you want something kind of cool like that you can tell a story, that's actually pretty cool. It is kind of sharp in the iodine kind of flavor of it because it's 600 million years old. But those are probably my two favorite.
So you actually have dinosaur salt in your pantry?
It's my secret now.
How about frozen peppers and onions?
Oh, those, man, that's too bad because peppers, things that grow in the summer, generally like right in the middle of the summer, late summer, don't freeze well at all. They're not prepared for ice crystals like chives or kale, things that come up really early or really late where there might be a frost. So, but anything like that, probably soups or stews or sauces is probably the best application. Maybe even, I guess if you already froze them, you already preserved them, so there's no reason to pickle them, but you could pickle them if you wanted to.
Some kind of, a southwestern soup or so, some pulled chicken that might be left over, the onions and peppers, tomato paste in there, And then some spices, some Southwest spices would be good. Generally, any kind of frozen vegetable, you're gonna want to kind of hide it in some kind of super stew like that, as opposed to sautéing it with a pasta where it's the flavor and the look of it is not going to be nearly as good as using fresh. So making soups and stews and things like that would be a good route.
Great. Green cabbage?
Make some sauerkraut.
Well, I'm from Hadley, so you can make clumpies, definitely with that. But really, probably one of the best cabbage recipes, I think, was from Diane Katrula's, where she made it like a braised cabbage with uzu, sausage, cream. I mean, it was really tasty, but obviously it's the sausage and the cream that really adds a ton of flavor. But also when I was out in Colorado last year at this restaurant, we had a wedge of braised cabbage. And it was just fantastic. It was just cooked pretty much seared and then cooked in chicken stock for probably about 4 hours or so. And it was absolutely delicious. So even something simple as that, or you can make slaws, or, what have you.
If you had that, that pork component, that bacon, sausage,
Cabbage and
things like that are gonna add a lot of flavor to it and make it really good. But slow cooking again is good with that. Slow braising, you can chop it up. First saute it with just some olive oil, and then add a splash of vinegar to it. Add some chicken stock to it, and kind of slow cook it until it's very tender. And again, adding any kind of flavor component would be fine. I mean, the pork products would be very good with cabbage. But I've seen on the internet recently that cabbage could be like the next kale. I mean, people are cooking with a lot of cabbage. They're braising it, they're searing it, they're grilling it, they're doing any number of things to it. So there's a lot of good stuff coming out with that with cabbage, and a ton of it is grown locally, and it lasts forever. So it is a good ingredient that you can have on hand. Or making a simple coleslaw, slicing it thin and adding, again, if it's a vinegar-based dressing or a mayonnaise-based dressing, but some shredded cabbage and carrots and a little bit of red onion or so, and you get a coleslaw.
Great. How about sweet potatoes?
Oh man, I mean, any root vegetable like that can really take on a lot of flavor. So probably, one of my most favorite things with sweet potatoes, either roasted and plain. However, probably like a sweet potato bisque, where you roast them, puree them, push them through a tammy, maybe in a blender, and then you can just add so many different flavors. One of my favorite soups is a curry sweet potato soup from Walter Scheid, who used to be the former White House chef. And it just really lends itself to like that kind of curries and things like that, which you probably have those spices in your pantry.
My kids like sweet potato fries, which can be kind of finicky to make. The sweet potatoes can kind of burn before they get crispy. But if you slice them up into French fry shape, if you toss them with a little bit of starch, like either it's cornstarch or rice flour, just a little bit to kind of coat it, along with some salt and pepper, any kind of seasoning. Take a baking pan, brush it with a good amount of oil. Olive oil tends to be not so good for this purpose, as it'll burn quicker. So like a canola oil or a vegetable oil. Lay the fries out on there, and then again a hot oven, like a 400-degree oven, flipping them halfway through, and they actually get pretty crispy. And it's an easy thing to do if you got kids, to get a kid to eat a sweet potato.
Yeah. And they're fantastic. There's so much vitamin A and C.
And one more, butternut squash. One person has sounds like a whole butternut, and the other one has cubes.
Well, if you ask Marlene, there's only one recipe, and it's a butternut lasagna with sage cream.
A little more complicated.
So if you have all day to make a really great lasagna, that ends up being, I think that's on her top 10 recipe list, but I mean, there's so many things.
One of the simplest soups, as Tony talked about, a sweet potato soup. But you can make a really complex butternut squash soup, or you can make one that's almost like, it's like 4 ingredients. You take some onions and/or garlic and kind of chop them up, slowly cook them down in some olive oil or butter so they're really super soft and tender. Add some chopped butternut squash to it. Add some chicken stock or vegetable stock. If you want a little bit richer, add a splash of heavy cream. A good pinch or so, of salt, depending on what you're making. And basically simmer it until the squash is really tender, and then puree it in a blender, or use an Emergent stick blender. So you got to have a blender to do that. And then if you want a little bit richer, as it's blending in the blender, just throw in a couple of chunks of butter to it, which will kind of emulsify in there. But it's the true essence of what butternut squash is. There's no added spices or flavorings, but 4 or 5 ingredients, you can actually make a really good soup.
Great. Well, those are all the questions, and we are out of time. So thank you so much. We can't wait for next week